now. Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm John King. To our viewers in the United States and around the world, thank you for sharing your Sunday. President Trump is at his Florida resort to celebrate Christmas after ending a year of legislative frustration with a big win on tax cuts.
The bottom line is this is the biggest tax cuts and reform in the history of our country. This is the bill right here, and we're very proud of it. It's going to be a tremendous thing for the American people. It's going to be fantastic for the economy.
When Washington gets back to work, it will be an election year, and the immediate challenges include Obamacare and immigration, putting the year-end Republican unity to a very quick 2018 test.
They're just kind of a potpourri of year-end things that were, in the end, not addressed yesterday that we'll have to turn to in January, and we'll work most of those out on a bipartisan basis and pass what we need to pass.
Plus, the Russia investigation cloud is as big as ever. The North Korean nuclear threat, too. Some of 2017's biggest global challenges will only loom larger in the new year.
For all of these nations that take our money and then they vote against us at the Security Council, or they vote against us potentially at the Assembly, they take hundreds of millions of dollars and even billions of dollars, and then they vote against us. Well, we're watching those votes. Let them vote against us. We'll save a lot. We don't care.
With us to share their reporting and their insights, Julie Pace of the Associated Press, Michael Scher of the New York Times, Sahil Kapoor of Bloomberg, and CNN's Mae Bresson. It's been too long. Welcome back to the East Coast. We begin with two very different takes on President Trump's first year. His take and the country's. The president sees historic success, capped by Friday's signing of that big Republican tax cut plan.
I consider this very much a bill for the middle class and a bill for jobs. And jobs are produced through companies and corporations, and you see that happening. Corporations are literally going wild over this, I think even beyond my expectations.
Plus, the president sees a year-end bonus in the tax bill.
I think it ultimately leads to the end of Obamacare. It's essentially, I think Obamacare is over because of that, and we're going to come up with something that's really going to be very good. But the individual mandate was very unfair.
The country, though, does not share the president's glowing take on 2017. His approval ratings are historically low, and the president is viewed by a clear majority of Americans as undisciplined, divisive, and dishonest. The veteran Democratic pollster Peter Hart summed up a year of polling and focus groups this way. It has been all about him and only him from day one, from the size of his inaugural crowd to his regular attacks on anybody who has something negative to say about him. No event or person is too small for Donald Trump to attack. Voters wanted change, not chaos. Let's have a conversation on Christmas Eve, people watching at home. Put this week, which was big, a lot happened this week, into the context of this year, which was also big and tumultuous.
Well, this was the president's best week legislatively, for certain. He finally got the big legislative victory that presidents actually expect to get in their first year. There's no doubt that it was a political success for he and for the Republicans. But I think Peter Hart's analysis is really spot on. This is a president who has been presiding over an economy that is pretty strong at this point. He has had some success in reshaping the judiciary. He got Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. There are some other signs that some of the punches that Republicans have landed on Obamacare that he is making progress on his agenda, but it is overshadowed at every turn by his own words and his actions. And that is resonating with the public. They are taking that seriously. They get frustrated by the tweets. They get frustrated by the divisive rhetoric. So if he is complaining about his legislative agenda and his executive agenda being overshadowed, it's his own fault.
And so his personal brand is so tainted with a majority of Americans. In some cases, when you look at these numbers, the overwhelming majorities of Americans, when you ask about honesty or is he up to the job, is he being a uniter, not a divider, is that it, that his success is that, and Republicans worry about this, we'll talk about 2018 elections a bit later in the program, but worry about this too, that his brand is so bad that even good things he doesn't get credit for.
That's certainly a part of it, I think. I mean, the fact that he was able to finish this year with the kind of trifecta of conservative ideological achievements is a huge victory for him. Not only $1.5 trillion in tax cuts, but ACA individual mandate repeal. And opening up Anwar to oil drilling. But the economy, as Julie pointed out, is doing well in the sense that the stock market is booming and there's something close to full employment. The real test is going to be in what people are feeling. Wages are still stagnant. People are still crushed with debt, especially if you're young. College tuition is not affordable for a lot of people. So the test is going to be, does this piece of legislation that President Trump has just signed deliver the kind of growth and the broad-based benefits that he has promised? One senior Republican I spoke to says, if this bill works the way we say it will, we're going to be okay. If not, we're in trouble.
Well, they say that with some trepidation, though, because even if people get more taxes, blue-collar people, they have more money in their wallets starting in February, yes, but the Trump brand is hurting everything they do.
Well, look, part of the irony here is that for a guy who both thinks, believes, and wants to portray everything to be about him, right? The great irony is that I don't know whether either the political establishment in Washington or the American public actually gives him credit for these victories, right? I mean, we know on Capitol Hill that they sort of feel like they got this despite him, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the American public feels that too, that to the extent that there have been some of these victories in a sense, the Gorsuch nomination or whatever, people view the president of having gotten in the way of all of that, and that some of these things happen despite the fact that he tweeted, despite the fact that he always steps on the message, despite the fact of the chaos. And so the question is, yes, there's these victories at the end of the year, but I'm not sure people are giving him any credit.
Well, it's interesting though. I was doing some door knocking in one of the midterm districts, and it was just fascinating to me that the people, when they come to the door and you ask them about Trump, that they often blame Congress for everything that wasn't getting done. Obviously, this was before the big tax reform victory, but he was very successful in getting that narrative across to voters that, that it's intransigence in Washington, that's standing in his way. And that is the genius of the Trump brand. When he repeats something enough, people internalize it.
And there's no question, even if you look at the president's dismal, historically low approval numbers, so we can show you these numbers. Let's just put them up there and look. Because if you look at a whole list of past presidents, the president can say he's doing great. The American people, which is the ultimate jury in American politics, don't think so. You look, that's the president at the bottom in yellow. There's the president's going all the way back to Eisenhower on that chart right there. That is dismal. And that's what the American people think at this point. But you are right. Congress is even less popular than that, especially with Republican voters. Republican voters don't like their own leaders, Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, even if they have questions about President Trump. One of the questions we ask at this time, they did get a big win on tax cuts. They kept the government open. In a moment, we'll get to the challenges waiting them next year. But did the president learn any lessons? We know at times he had dysfunction in his relationships with his own party, including the leaders, the speaker and the majority leader. Listen to the president on the big signing week, the big celebration of tax cuts. Is this going to last?
Paul Ryan and Mitch, it was a little team. We just got together and we would work very hard, didn't we? Huh? It seems like it was a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun when you win. If you work hard and lose, that's not acceptable.
Go ahead.
I think he did actually learn a lot of lessons after the Obamacare disaster for him earlier this year. When you talk to people who talk to the president frequently now, they say that in tax reform, he was much more engaged. He understood that he had to give on some things. And, he didn't go out and bash parts of the bill or the lawmakers that he needed in that moment. And that he has evolved in that way in understanding how Congress works, in, asking questions about what it's going to take to get X lawmaker to yes. So I think in that respect, maybe we will see some more legislative success from him because he understands the lesson now.
I do think that one of the lessons that the White House staff learned is that there is expertise on Capitol Hill. That even though this is a White House that came in vowing to blow up the city, thinking that everybody in Washington who's been here forever is kind of a joke and can't get anything done, there are people who've been working on tax reform for a very long time. Paul Ryan at the top of the list, and there is sort of a newfound respect from some corners of the White House at the ability of the Hill to kind of wrangle something this large and really understand the complexities.
And President Trump even pointed that out, at that ceremony. I think he was calling out Rob Portman and other people who had understood the intricacies of the tax code and giving them credit for that.
And one of the big lessons he learned is to simply not get in the way. He got in the way repeatedly in the healthcare battle. He called the House bill mean. He said one of the bills needs more heart. He didn't do that with the tax bill. I think he's not a policy wonk in the sense that he's delving into these details and making demands, and that helped because one of the things he campaigned on was the elimination of the carried interest loophole for investment fund managers. That was largely preserved with a bit of a tweak in this bill. That's a broken promise, but at the end of the day, the president was willing to accept it to get something done.
One of the things he was unable to do is any bipartisan deal making. Remember the campaign, they're all stupid in Washington. I cut deals. This is what I do for a living. I'm going to get everybody together. He wanted to do infrastructure in year one. He never even sent the plan up to Capitol Hill. So that was a promise broken. But he says it will be priority number one in year two. Is there any reason to believe as we sit here in a midterm election year with the president's numbers in the tank, the Democrats are going to raise their hand and cooperate?
No, and on infrastructure in particular, there's no reason to believe that House Speaker Paul Ryan will want to cooperate either. That's not his priority. I also want to be the sort of voice of kind of skepticism about Donald Trump learning. I mean, learning suggests that you both kind of understand what worked and then you apply that in the future. And I don't know that I have a lot of confidence that the next moment he decides he's angry with Mitch McConnell, that he's not going to fire off another nasty tweet to somebody that he needs. And so, I mean, I guess the proof will be in the pudding. Maybe he will have learned, and, we'll sort of see, to Maeve's point, whether he gets more legislative.
He may have learned, but we're not saying necessarily that he'll change.
It is a bit of a low bar. It is a bit of a low bar.
Amen on the low bar. I would define pudding as the second and third week of January. We'll put your test right there.
We'll see.
Everybody sit tight. Up next, the showdown at the United Nations to close a controversial year on the world stage for the president and his America First agenda. But first, politicians say the darndest things, especially when talking about their Christmas plans. Yes, as we've discussed, the president and the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell are getting along better of late, but there are limits.
Do you have any plans to visit Mar-a-Lago over the holiday?
No. The closest I'm going to a bowl game in Jacksonville.
From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first. Every decision on trade, on taxes, on immigration, on foreign affairs will be made to benefit American workers and American families.
It's a memorable chunk of the president's inaugural address and another reminder this past week that America First has in this first year often translated into America alone or America isolated. Both the United Nations Security Council and the larger General Assembly rebuked President Trump this past week for officially recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, accusing the United States of taking sides on a question long set aside to be settled in Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations. The White House could have ignored the UN rebuke, but instead it relished the fight and promised there will be a price to pay for it.
The United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations. And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit.
Interesting first year in the sense of confrontation there at the United Nations, confrontation early on with NATO allies, a confrontation with the world and walking away from a climate change agreement, and yet efforts, despite traditional Republican foreign policy, to try to have more friendly relations with Russia and China in the middle of all those confrontations.
That reminded me of the trip that we were on in when he went and spoke at the at NATO and was supposed to sort of reaffirm his, the Article 5 commitment to standing up for the NATO allies, and didn't at the last minute. And it was a similar kind of moment where, what he wanted to say at the time and what Nikki Haley just said there was, stressing the financial obligations that the United States has to the rest of the world, and essentially asserting that they owe us.
One of the interesting things I thought, Michael will remember this because we covered the Obama administration together, is President Obama actually made a similar point quite frequently, which is that when something happens in the world, when there is money needed, when there are troops needed, there's a fast response needed, the whole world comes to the United States, and then the United States often gets criticized. And the posture of the Obama administration and Democratic and Republican administrations previously, it was basically that, while yes, that burden is maybe unfair on the United States, that is our role in the world. And Trump has flipped it around on its head and basically decided that the playing field perhaps should be more equal. And for a lot of Republicans, that is really troubling, because that is the uniqueness of the United States, that we do step up in these moments. And the fact that we do put more troops and more money and more effort into helping people around the world is again part of the extraordinary nature of this country, not a burden.
And that tone matters so much because, as Julie pointed out, President Obama and previous presidents, including George W. Bush, viewed this as something we should embrace, something that the United States embraces. That Nikki Haley speech, I think, speaks to the president's attitude a lot, in that it was a little bit defiant, it was a little bit confrontational, there was a bit of don't mess with us, a little bit of bullying. It kind of speaks to the challenges, the bifurcated nature of the president's foreign policy. If you zoom out, there's the America First politics, which does very well with his base, which polls well, I think, even a little bit outside his base. But then there's the complex set of challenges that you have to grapple with to make your foreign policies work on the issue of Middle East peace. President Trump says he wants this, yet he's prejudged the most explosive issue that has hung up, attempts at making peace for decades. On the issue of free settling refugees, he says, let's not invite them here, let's resettle them in their own home, but he wants to cut foreign aid, so how do we do that at the same time? That disconnect, I don't see them squaring that disconnect, and when there is that tension, he always defaults, usually at least, defaults to the America First side.
And yet, at the same time, we did see this past week, some progress with Russia and China, collaboration in cracking down on North Korea and really understanding that threat. So will the Trump administration get a lot of credit for that? I mean, it's just interesting that all of these things happen at the same time.
It's an interesting point. 15-0 Friday at the Security Council. New sanctions on North Korea. Mark me down as skeptical. I think the world is skeptical. Any more sanctions? It's the most sanctioned regime ever. But you're right. Often China or Russia might veto. China or Russia might abstain. The president's diplomacy with the two did get the votes there, which recalls a signature moment in this first year of confrontation on the world stage. The president in the well of the United Nations talking about the man he calls Rocket Man.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
This has been, I think, a textbook example. It was discussed a moment ago of what we've seen. Sometimes the president's tough words or Ambassador Haley's tough words, not always backed up by exact actions that entirely match the tough words. They say that's part of the plan. Keep people off balance, keep it unpredictable. We end the year with North Korea as big a threat, even maybe a bigger threat than we began the year.
The year has been really fascinating when you look at it through this North Korea issue. The trend line has essentially been the U.S. doing more of the same, with the exception of Trump's change in rhetoric, being more aggressive, but largely relying on sanctions, largely trying to get China to change its behavior. And the trend line from North Korea has been that they've moved forward in their nuclear capabilities. And that's what has people so worried, that leveling more sanctions is not going to get this regime to back down. Tough talk is not getting this regime to back down. Is this going to come to a head in 2018? Most foreign policy experts inside and outside the administration say that this is the biggest crisis right now.
And look, the truth is that during the campaign, then candidate Trump was highly critical of President Obama for backing away from his red line in Syria. And he put himself forth as this kind of guy that is going to follow up his words with actions. And he's finding, as many presidents do, that it's harder than it looks, and that these sort of intractable problems are intractable for a reason. But the challenge is that when you advance your rhetoric in as aggressive a way as he has, you often find that the rest of the world leaders are looking around saying, well, are you following through on that? And he's not.
Right, and oftentimes they're being told by his cabinet secretaries, pay no attention to what the president said. We're going to stay on this path. The major subplot of the Putin dynamic throughout the year, the president has made clear he wants to have a better working relationship. He believes that he's being sidetracked by the Russia investigations to having that throughout the year. The president knows congressional committees and now a very important special counsel investigation that has 2 plea deals, including a national security advisor, plea deal in cooperation, 2 indictments, yet the president throughout the year says this.
As far as hacking, I think it was Russia, but I think we also get hacked by other countries and other people.
How many times do I have to answer this question?
Can you just say
Russia
yes or no
is
on
a
it?
ruse.
The entire thing has been a witch hunt. The Russia story is a total fabrication.
I have nothing to do with Russia. Everybody knows it. That was a Democrat hoax.
Russia is a ruse was a response to your question early on. But look, we end the year. The president somehow got convinced by some of his attorneys he was going to get a Christmas gift, a letter of exoneration from the special counsel. This was going to be winding down. This is expanding. This is not winding down. This is getting closer to the West Wing, not farther from the West Wing. Right?
Absolutely.
You saw Don Jr., this past week spreading conspiracy theories and talking about people, the decks being stacked against the administration. So they're obviously not going to back away from that rhetoric anytime soon, but it's just very different from what the reality is.
Absolutely. And the president has been told by his lawyers that this is going to wrap up soon, by the end of this year. What does he do when he shows back up in Washington in January and realizes that these investigations, both on the Hill, but most importantly the Mueller investigation, are ongoing? How does he respond? That's what has a lot of Republicans, frankly, nervous about how he could react to that.
And I think as the president is in Florida for the Christmas break and he starts seeing these stories and he starts realizing 2 indictments, cooperation from General Flynn, cooperation from Papadopoulos, Jared Kushner's team hiring legal team hiring a crisis manager. They all think this is going well into 2018.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And this could be, I think we just hit on the 2 issues that could be potentially the 2 most cataclysmic issues of 2018, how the president handles the Russia investigation, what the verdict of that is, and the North Korea situation. I don't even need to describe how devastating that could be if that doesn't go the right way.
Here's some other 2018 challenges for you. Got to sneak in a quick break. The Republicans left town at Christmas time celebrating their tax cut. They come back to a lot of quicksand.
I guess it's very simple. When you think you haven't heard this expression, but we are making America great again. You haven't heard that, have you?
No, I hadn't heard that. Pictures do speak 1,000 words, or maybe a million, and that tax cut celebration we just showed you at the White House was genuine. Republicans from the president on down are thrilled. They closed 2017 with a big win. It's good for team morale, good for a dispirited Republican base, and we all should hope good for the economy and America's global standing. But, this is a big but, the GOP glow will face some giant immediate tests in 2018, a midterm election year that's already tilted in the Democrats' favor. To get that tax cut celebration and a holiday break, they guaranteed early election year fights on issues that are quicksand or worse within the Republican ranks. The Senate, for example, left for January a disaster relief bill some conservatives label full of deficit-exploding pork. Defense hawks and deficit hawks also are at odds over lifting Pentagon spending caps. To win tax cut votes, the Senate leadership promised votes on Obamacare fixes that House conservatives view as heresy. And even if it comes with some border wall funding, some conservatives see a plan to protect the so-called dreamers as amnesty. So they celebrated their Christmas tax cut, but they got a lot of coal. Especially for Republicans. There's some tough issues there for the Democrats as well. But given the 2018, given the dynamic, given the president's polling numbers, it looks like a wave could be coming for the Democrats. How do conservatives walk back into the Capitol and grant what some of them call amnesty? Spend more money. How do they keep it together?
This right now is the calm before the storm. They kick this negotiation and all these issues that they have to deal with into January, and once they get there, they have to do, you mentioned some things, there's government funding, defense and non-defense cap. They have to deal with the children's health insurance program, flood insurance, 2 Obamacare stabilization bills, DACA and young undocumented people, disaster relief, VA medical care. They're going to have to raise the debt limit sometime in March or so. Other than that, it's a light agenda. But, it's going to be very difficult. These promises were made to get this tax bill through. They are eager to go home and celebrate without money running out for the children's health insurance program, which is why they had about a $2.8 billion patch so they don't have to deal with these awful headlines. How they deal with this next year in the face of primary season coming up when a lot of these conservatives are not going to want to vote for things like immigration and Obamacare stabilization.
If you keep some of these promises, you blow up the Republican Party. If you break some of these promises, you blow up the Republican Party.
Can I just focus on one? I mean, all of these things are big and divisive and whatever. I think the immigration fight that they're going to have over DACA is, in some ways, Trump's election kind of pushed back the reckoning that the Republican Party has been having to sort of struggle with over the changing demographics of America and the fact that Hispanics, they have over more than a decade been pushing Hispanics away from the Republican Party. And there were voices in the Republican Party before Trump that said let's try to fix that. and they're going into a fight that is highly emotional. You have this like really sympathetic group of young dreamers, and come March, at the beginning of March, many of them are going to be facing deportation, but not only facing deportation, facing an administration that it's not just a theoretical concern. They want to deport people. I mean, the administration is sending out the enforcers to go find people and round them up, and you see kind of beginning happening all over California and in the interior of the country. And so like this is a fight that in an election year the Republican Party is going to take on, and I think there's a lot of deep concern among part of the party that understands the way this comes out may be very bad for them long term.
And it's a fight that Democrats are eager to take on. Many of them actually wanted to take it on and wanted to push Chuck Schumer to actually get this done in December because they feel like it's a political winner for them. And to Michael's point, we're living in this sort of strange moment where all of the trend lines that Republicans know are coming have been a bit paused by the Trump administration. But when you look at the numbers, not just for Hispanics, but for young people, it's pretty devastating for Republicans long term. And Democrats are very willing to pick a fight and try to define the party on this issue.
And on top of that, the president has added the suburb problem. By the way he conducts himself in office. You have the long-term demographics you're dead right about, and then he's created another newer problem,
which is in Virginia
and Alabama. Alabama has a Democratic senator in a couple of weeks because of the suburbs. Please.
But it's interesting in contrast to Trump's rhetoric during the campaign. If you talk to people who have talked to him recently about immigration, he is really open to a lot of these ideas that you wouldn't expect from him. On the DACA fix, that was very important to Jeff Flake. He was a holdout on the tax reform bill until the last moment, until he got a commitment from Mitch McConnell that that they would have a vote on that in January. So I think that's going to happen, and it's going to be very difficult for the Democrats if there is a true fix for the Dreamers. It's going to be very difficult for the Democrats to back away from that.
But immigration is one of those issues with Trump where he tends to follow a pattern. There are his own instincts about it, which tend to lean toward, let's make a deal. We can find a way to help these people. And then when he hears from people like Steve Bannon, who represent sort of his base, and he is reminded of the fact that immigration was such a motivator for his voters, and he's told about the risks of disappointing that base, that idea hangs over Trump really heavy.
But if he can brag about the wall,
central.
If
he can brag about the wall, whatever kind of wall it is, however high it is, then I think he can emphasize that with his base and potentially bring some more people on board in the middle for the midterm elections with the DACA fix.
But he's not going to get a wall if Democrats have anything to say about it. And they need 60 votes in the Senate, and they don't have close to that on the Republican side. The issue of immigration is so central to President Trump's base. He was the one person on that stage of, 16, 17 Republican candidates who emphatically took the hard line against immigration, and that's where the power is in the Republican Party right now. If he does something like help the Dreamers, which he's said, rhetorically, he's showed some sympathy there and said he wants to do, if he does that, he will face some backlash in his base as well. The loudest voices, even if they're a minority, it'll be difficult.
And remember the calendar. Remember the calendar. It's an election year. The president's approval ratings are already a huge danger sign for the Republicans. Their majorities are at risk. They're going to be making these decisions in January, February, and March. Still time in many states, most states, to mount a primary challenge. Absolutely. So you have Republicans being asked to cast tough votes, and you have the aforementioned Steve Bannon saying, go ahead, cast a vote I don't like. I'll recruit somebody to run against you.
Find me the Republican who wants to vote for legalization of anybody right before a primary.
But also, how much juice does Bannon have at this point?
We're going to find that out in 2018. That's going to be a great 2018 test. Speaking of juice, when the president wants to share his opinion, where does he usually do it? On the internet. The president and his tweets when we come back.
They're well crafted. I was a good student. I'm like a person that does well with that kind of thing. And I doubt I'd be here if it weren't for social media, to be honest with you, because there is a fake media out there. I get treated very unfairly by the media. So when somebody says something about me, I'm able to go bing, 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 and I take care of it.
Bing, bing, bing. We learned a lot about the new president in 2017, including that the very, very, very vocal bipartisan chorus urging him to tweet less, think more, was a waste of time. All year long, often before sunrise, presidential tweets were our best straight-from-the-source take on what was first and foremost, on the president's mind. Let's take a look. In all, 2,400 tweets from the President of the United States and counting since taking office. Some of them attack the news media. The fake mainstream media, he says, is working hard to get him to not use social media. I've never met a reporter who wants the president to stop tweeting. This one would not pass the fact check. He often as well has pitched, you might call this a conspiracy theory, accusing his predecessor, President Obama, of tapping the wires, wiretapping at Trump Tower. The president called it McCarthyism. It has not been proven to have actually happened. And sometimes he goes after friends and foe alike, including members of his own party. Senator Bob Corker here, who he calls in this tweet the incompetent head of the Foreign Relations Committee. They made a little bit of détente in the tax cut debate. Throughout the year, reading a lot of tweets like this, a lot of counterpunches, including to Republicans, this lesson was learned. If you do not want to be on the receiving end of a tweet storm, say nice things.
This has been a year of extraordinary accomplishment for the Trump administration.
Something this big, something this generational, something this profound could not have been done without exquisite presidential leadership.
Mr. President, I have to say that you're living up to everything I thought you would. You're one heck of a leader, and we're all benefiting from it.
That was an important lesson, was it not, of the year? If you don't want to get thumped, be nice. That's one thing we learned. What else?
We learned that the president tweets very early, and that has changed the way that Washington works. Look, you were right when you said that you don't know any reporters that wanted to stop tweeting, because what's been amazing about it is that you can really read his mood. You can read his real thoughts about a situation. You start to figure out the trends in it. You know when something is bubbling up and getting really intense on the Russia investigation in particular, when he starts going after Mueller, when he starts trying to throw some distractions out there. It has really reshaped the way we cover the presidency, sometimes in not so good ways, but the access that you get to the real-time thinking of the president has been astonishing.
That's amazing, but it's also incredibly difficult because they are so unmoored from, in many cases, the truth or the facts or what have you. I mean, just the other day when he tweeted out that there was going to be a news conference at 1 p.m. The event was at 3, it wasn't at 1, it wasn't a press conference, it was, they took no questions. And so, when your editor as a reporter says, so there's a press conference at 1 tomorrow. No, maybe. I mean, it's possible. And you think if that little thing it's difficult, think about what world leaders are trying to do when they're trying to decode what's really truth.
Right, and that has been from day one. We saw this during the campaign. Some people thought it would be different when he actually took his hand off the Bible and he was president of the United States, is that from day one, for where we are now, this is a president, sometimes big, sometimes small, sometimes in the middle, has a huge trouble with the truth.
People came out and voted like they've never seen before. So that's the way it goes. I guess it was the biggest electoral college win since Ronald Reagan. The taxes are crazy. The highest taxed nation in the world. We're going to turn that around very quickly. We've signed more bills, and I'm talking about through the legislature, than any president ever. For a while, Harry Truman had us. And now I think we have everybody, Mike. I better say think, otherwise they'll give you a Pinocchio. And I don't like those. I don't like Pinocchios.
He's gotten a lot of Pinocchios. That's what the Washington Post fact checker uses when someone tells non-truths, and the president's told a lot of them. The New York Times also took a look at this. Look at this graphic. Look at this graphic. Lies versus Obama. Trump versus Obama. Trump, 100 in 11 months. Obama, 18 in 8 years.
These are the unique things about President Trump. I mean, he just cut taxes. A lot of presidents have cut taxes. Not a lot of them are as fast and loose with the truth, frankly, as he is. Not a lot of them play up the culture wars and kind of have this knack for stoking grievances the way he does. The feuding with everybody from John McCain, a war hero, to Gold Star parents, to a beauty pageant contestant, to a judge who's of Mexican ancestry. He is a culture war president more than anything else.
And that's the stew that makes it so hard for him to shake this toxic brand. The tweets, the mistruths, some would call them lies, divisive words like after Charlottesville where you said both sides when it was clearly the neo-Nazi white nationalists who started things. So even when he passes a tax cut, he can't get to the sunlight, if you will, because people have him under this.
And this very thing is what really bothers the midterm voters that they are going to need to hold control of the House and Senate. You go out and talk to people and they just can't stand the tweeting and the exaggerations and the tone. So it just is going to be maybe what the election will partly be about.
It'll be a fascinating 2017 behind us, a fascinating 2018 ahead of us. When we come back, yes, the Russia investigation is a giant cloud over the White House. As our reporters share their notebooks, why also does it motivate Republicans to get things done and soon. One last time around the table, ask our great reporters to share a little something from their notebooks, help get you out ahead of the big political news just around the corner. Julie Pace?
One of the really important things that's been a bit lost in the conversation this year about the Russian meddling in the 2016 election is whether there have been any lessons learned and steps taken to protect campaigns going forward against hackings from Russia or other state actors. I've talked to a lot of people who are going to be involved in 2018 midterms, and there's a real fear that, well, we've been discussing a lot the prospect of collusion or President Trump's involvement. There hasn't been enough discussion about helping the parties and the campaigns actually protect themselves. And this is not just at the presidential level. This really is about the midterm elections. So expect to see a lot of discussion behind the scenes next year about how these campaigns can protect themselves, not just from Russia, but from China, North Korea, other potential bad actors out there.
It would help if the White House cared.
Yep.
Michael?
Speaking of elections, I'll go local as a ex-Virginia reporter. Come Wednesday will be one of the most remarkable moments in elections, where in Virginia, a House of Delegates seat that ended up after several tens of thousands of votes exactly tied will be decided when election officials draw a name out of a hat, essentially. They're actually putting the names in little film canisters, and they're going to pull them out, and whoever they pull out will be the next delegate. But it's also important not just because it will decide this race, but because the outcome of this race decides the balance of power in the entire Virginia House of Delegates, who becomes Speaker, how many people get, which party gets majorities on the committees. It's a really big moment. Still probably some lawsuits to come, but that's politics in America.
Sometimes every vote actually does count.
Indeed.
President Trump jetted off to Mar-a-Lago on Friday after signing his tax cut bill, a major legislative achievement to cap the year. He said a few things that I would like to fact check in his parting remarks. He said it was the largest tax cut in history. It is smaller in real dollar terms than the one President Obama signed in 2013. As a share of the economy, it's also significantly smaller than the one Reagan signed in 1981. He said he's had the most legislative approvals of any president up until this point in his presidency. He's actually signed the fewest bills of any president since Dwight Eisenhower. That's according to the independent analyst GovTrack. He said the tax bill is selling itself, becoming very popular. That is not the case yet. Quite the opposite. Americans approve of it by a wide margin. This is the key sales job that Republican leaders have between now and the 2018 election. Can they make the public like it?
What's the old saying? You're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts?
We've been talking about all these big legislative priorities that Republicans have going forward. And it's not just that they feel emboldened by the tax reform victory. There is actually some fear among Republicans that there are rumblings that Mueller's closing in on Don Jr., and they want to get as much done with the president's help before that point, because a lot of them are very worried about what he might do if his son ended up in real legal jeopardy, and that would potentially not make him a very good partner in legislation.
Understandable worries if that were to become the case. I want to close today by saying thank you. Thank you to the tiny but tireless teams in Washington and Atlanta who get Inside Politics on the air 6 days a week. Thanks to the correspondents like this group in our IP family who juggle their already crazy schedules to share their time and their reporting with us and with you. And most of all, thank you for sharing your time with us. We know you're busy, and we know that you have choices. We are grateful. I am grateful for your time and support. Have a safe and Merry Christmas. That's it for Inside Politics. But sit tight if you can. Senator Bernie Sanders joins State of the Union with Jake Tapper next.